Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I'm back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, what's the difference between hypertrophy training and strength training? Good question. So hypertrophy training would be more for what bodybuilders train for, the aesthetics component, building a physique, but building a physique that's symmetrical, building a physique that offers lean, solid, dense muscle, building a physique that you can actually look at and go, wow, that person's in shape. That's what hypertrophy training is. Okay. Whereas someone who's training purely for strength, i.e., like a power lifter, for example, they don't necessarily care how they look. The aesthetics kind of take a back seat. It's more about how much can you lift. Okay, so a lot of power lifters, they'll stay within that 1 to 6 rep range, and the goal is to lift as much weight as possible. So the two have very different physiques because a bodybuilder, someone who's out there building their body, who is doing the hypertrophy training, it's like an artist. Okay, you're like an artist in the gym. You're trying to create a sculpture. So it's not necessarily about how much weight do you lift. It's how can I get my biceps bigger, but also more defined? How can I get my chest wider, but also more striated? How can I get my back to be looking that V taper, but at the same time, not the risk of making my waistline bigger? So a bodybuilder has to take all these factors into consideration when building his or her physique. Whereas a power lifter, again, they have to focus more on the main objective, which is the amount of weight that they can lift. Okay. I think both offer benefits. It really comes down to what your goal is. Okay. Most people that come to work with me, actually, everyone that comes to work with me, is more concerned about becoming more healthy, fit, and improving their aesthetics. They want to lose their gut. Okay, they want to look, feel better. Guys want to be able to take their shirt off and feel confident at the beach. Women want to be able to wear something a little bit tighter, tight jeans, get into a maybe 3 or 4 sizes down in their dress size, whatever it may be. So, and that's what I specialize in. I don't work with powerlifters. If I have someone who contacts me for powerlifting, I usually refer out. I've had that in the past. It's not my specialty. Okay. But I think, like I said, both offer their benefits. But again, both have very different physiques and both have very different diets because a bodybuilder, even though you do need to put on muscle, and to put on muscle, you need to eat, you have to be careful that you don't spill over. So there's that fine line is, yes, you want to consume protein, but you don't want to consume too much protein because then you're going to get fat, you're going to get sloppy. So a bodybuilder's diet has to be very careful as to how much macronutrients they're doing on a daily basis with their carbohydrates, their healthy fats, and their lean protein sources. A power lifter, because that power lifter doesn't necessarily care about how he or she looks, the objective is to get as much calories, I should say, sorry, as much calories as you can get into your body as possible, because calories give you energy. Energy is going to allow you to lift heavier weights, which will allow you to build more muscle. But the power lifter is most likely going to put on some body fat at the same time, okay? Because they're going to be constantly in a caloric surplus. Where a bodybuilder, in my opinion, to put on weight, you don't need to be in a crazy caloric surplus to do that. Whereas a power lifter does, though, because they are lifting substantially heavier weights. So that's the main difference. And it really comes down to what your goal is. Okay. So if you're just concerned about how much weight you can lift and maybe you're doing a few powerlifting competitions, well, then yeah, you want to train for strength. Okay. But if you do care about how you look and how you feel and you're a little bit vain, well, you're going to train like a bodybuilder and therefore you're going to follow hypertrophy training protocol. That works best for your goal. Okay. So you really have to assess what your goal is, assess your physique, assess your lifestyle, and say, okay, I want to do this, so I'm going to eat like this, I'm going to train like this. That's very important because if you want to be a bodybuilder and you're eating like a power lifter, it's not going to happen. And if you want to be a power lifter, you're eating like a bodybuilder, you're not going to be your very best. So the diet and the training correlate together along with proper supplementation. All right. Okay. Nick, how many reps and sets are best for muscle growth? Ideally, we recommend people stick within that 4 to 5 reps per exercise, or 4 to 5 sets per exercise, and in that 10 to 15 rep range per set. Okay. Now, I work with a lot of people who I only do 3 sets per exercise, but a lot of people who work with me in house might only train with me 2 or 3 times a week. So what I do tend to do with those people is I reduce the sets by increase the volume of exercises. So if we're doing, let's say, a chest, back, and leg workout, I might only give them 3 sets of incline barbell bench press, 3 sets of lat pull down, and 3 sets of barbell back squats in a circuit. But we're doing that 3 times, 9 sets, and knock that out in 10, 12 minutes, and move on to a new circuit of 3 more exercises. So I'll do that for a lot of my clients who only go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. And a lot of people, that's it. They only go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, and there's nothing wrong with that. In my opinion, that's the best way to train if you're not training every day. Now, if you're someone who goes to the gym 5, 6 days a week, ideally you want to increase that volume for your sets. So 4 rounds work best. So maybe 4 to 5 rounds even, and throw in some drop sets or throw in some supersets. That tends to work best when you're trying to build muscle, the hypertrophy. Okay. So that's actually really the definition of the hypertrophy training is higher volume. Okay. So again, minimal rest periods. We talked about that in the past. Ideally, that double digits, 10 to 15 rep range works best. And then really try to focus on both the concentric contraction and the eccentric contraction of movement. That's very important. I see so many people bouncing weights around in the gym and not practicing proper tempo speed, and they get injured or they don't get results. And then they tell me, oh, my joints hurt. I'm like, well, of course your joints hurt because you're doing ballistic repetitions. So you really want to make sure that you control both the negative and positive of every exercise that you do, the eccentric and concentric contractions. This is crucial. Okay. But typically I recommend if you're in the gym 5 to 6 days a week, 4 sets per exercise. 5 if you are more advanced in your training. And I like, for me personally, what I like to do is I like to throw a drop set in at the end of each exercise. So let's say I'm doing 5 sets of incline barbell bench press. On my last set, so set number 5, I'll knock out maybe 10 reps and then I'll strip the weight in half and I'll knock out another 10 reps. I only advise people to do drop sets on the last set of an exercise. Okay. Take that exercise to true fatigue. If you're training smart, you're not going to do it for another week. So might as well just take it to true fatigue, true failure, and then you're done. True failure without risking injury because now you're looking for lighter weight. So again, it comes down to training smarter, not necessarily harder. But that's generally my recommendation. If you're in the gym 2, 3 times a week, maybe keep those exercises at 3 sets, but increase the volume of exercise selection you're doing. So you can still do those 3 sets of incline barbell bench press, but you could also do 3 sets of flat barbell bench press, and you could move on to 3 sets of incline dumbbell bench press, and maybe finish off with 3 sets of low incline dumbbell flies. I'm using chest as an example here, right? So you're getting 4 exercises in for chest right there, 12 sets. Okay. So, you got to structure a program that makes sense for you. Okay. So don't follow someone who's, if you're in a gym 2, 3 times a week and you're following someone's program who's in the gym 5, 6 times a week, that's not going to work for you. Okay. So you want to follow the program that works specifically for you, your lifestyle, your goals, and realistically what you can do in the gym. I've got people who work with me online that says, Nick, I'm lucky if I can get a 40-minute workout in 3 times a week. No problem. But we're going to program specifically for that. Okay. I'm going to give you a program that should take you no longer than 40 minutes to do. Okay. I'm not going to give you a program that's going to take you 2 hours to do. It doesn't make sense. So you have to be realistic with what your goals are, and you have to be realistic with what your expectations are. Okay. But those are my recommendations, and those are the guidelines I typically follow with people, depending on how often they are in the gym training. Okay. Okay. Nick, what's the optimal training split for building muscle? In a perfect world, it's a 6 day split, in my opinion. Okay. So if you're serious, like for example, if someone wants to compete in bodybuilding, I always tell them, like, look, if you're truly serious about putting on muscle and losing fat and you just have average genetics, you're going to need to be in that gym 6 days a week. If you're a genetic freak, you could probably get away 4 or 5 times a week. But most people, including myself, are not genetic freaks. So they need to be in the gym training. So with a 6 day split, it varies because I change up the split based on who I'm working with. I also look at muscular imbalances. I also look at the fitness level of the person I'm working with. And I also assess their strengths and weaknesses. So I have some clients who I work with who up top, incredible physique, but then down low, it doesn't look like they train their legs. So for those people, I might put a little bit more emphasis into the leg workouts and give them 2 leg days, right? But if I'm working with someone who's got fantastic legs, I'm like, you know what? We don't need to spend as much time and focus on your legs. We still need to train them, but we can back off and maybe just give them 1 workout a week and give more detail. Let's say if you're lacking in your back, maybe give you 2 back workouts. Okay. So that could look like something if you're doing a 6 day split. And let's say that you are weak in your lower back, or let's say you're weak in your back in general. What I would do in this case, I'd throw someone on like a day one being chest and a day two being your row day, just rows for back. Your day three being your pull down day for back. So you got two back days. One's a row day, one's a pull day. This would be for someone who has a weaker back. Okay. And then I would throw in day four could be shoulders, and then day five could be arms, and then day six could be legs, and then day seven take off. Now, if I'm working with someone who maybe is weaker in the lower body, okay, so they've got a great upper body, but they're lacking detail in their quadriceps. They have no glute hamstring tie-in. In this scenario, I might say, okay, you know what? We need to give your legs an extra day. So I'll still start off with chest day one, but I'll give just one back day. So I'll include the pull downs and the rows in day two. Then I'll go shoulders day three, and I'll go arms day four. But then day five and six, I'll go back to back leg days. And that might look like something like a day five could be a quadricep focus day. So we're just focusing on the quads, barbell back squats, hack squats, leg press, lunges, leg extensions, etc. The day two, which would be day six, could be something like hamstrings, glutes, and calves. So that could be lying hamstring curls, seated hamstring curls, straight leg deadlifts, barbell hip thrusts, standing calf raises, seated calf raises. So even though you're working your lower body, you're working different muscles in your lower body. And even though if you're, again, let's go back to the first scenario, if you're weak in your lower back, you're working different angles. Okay. So I don't do the same exercises when I structure a program like that. But I feel that that's the best training split for someone who is very serious about putting on muscle and losing fat. Generally, someone who wants to compete in bodybuilding. Every single person I work with who competes in bodybuilding trains 6 days a week. It's just the way it is. Okay. I don't really have any genetic freaks on my roster. So they know they got to put into work. Now, if you're someone who's like, you know what, I want to put on some muscle and lose some fat. I just want to look good with my shirt off. I want to feel good. You don't have to be in the gym 6 days a week. You could be in the gym 3 days a week. Like I said, I have a lot of people on my roster who train 2, 3 days a week, and that's fine. Okay, that's fine. You're not going to make incredible transitions in your body, of course not, but you can still develop a great physique. And that training split will look very different than someone who's in the gym 5, 6 days a week, obviously. But as I've said in the past, someone who's working with me, say 3 times a week, I might say, okay, day one, I'm going to give you chest and back. Day two, I'm going to give you shoulders, biceps, triceps. And day three, I'm going to give you quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, and I'll throw some abs in on one of those workouts. Okay. So honestly, it really depends on how often you yourself can get to the gym. And that's going to dictate what the best training split is for you. Okay. But again, you need to assess your strengths and your weaknesses. Know your genetic potential. Understand that you're not going to be a genetic freak. I mean, you might be a genetic freak, but they're very, in 22 years of doing this, I've never actually met firsthand a genetic freak. Say, I've never worked with one. So the chances of you being a genetic freak are rare. So you're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to do your cardio, and you're going to have to put together a program that makes sense. Okay. So in order to do that, like I said, you have to be realistic. What can I do? How often can I get to the gym? Assess your strengths, assess your weaknesses, know your physical limitations, work with your genetics and not against them. That's going to be the best training split for you. Okay. Nick, what's the role of tempo speed in muscle building? You know, actually, this is a really good question. And it reminds me of something that happened earlier this past week. One of my clients who was just doing reps crazy fast. And there are people that do that. Now, what I call those repetitions are ballistic repetitions. And, you know, if you're in gyms for years or you go to the gym a lot, you're going to see people like this. And a lot of people don't realize that they're even doing it. And the problem is when you're doing repetitions too quickly, as in bouncing them off, right? Using momentum. What's happening is you're putting a lot of stress on your joints. You're locking out your elbows on a bench press. You're locking out your knees on a squat. So you're really putting a lot of pressure and strain on your joints. The goal in the gym is to preserve your joints. The less work your joints have to do, the better. Okay. Because when I have people that come to see me and say, oh, you know, I can't squat, can't lunge because I got bad knees. I'm like, the reason you have bad knees is because you don't squat and you don't lunge. So we need you to get you back into the gym. We need you to start squatting. We need you to start lunging. Okay. No, we're not going to get you under the bar and squat 315 from day one. Okay. And no, we're not going to be giving you 40-pound dumbbells to lunge with, but we're going to ease you back into it. But in order to strengthen your joints, you need to strengthen the muscles surrounding the joints. So tempo speed is very important because if you're going too fast, you're going to put too much stress on your joints. Same sense, if you're going too slow, in my opinion, you're going to put too much strain on your tendons and ligaments. So in order to keep the constant tension on the muscle bellies, I find the best tempo speed to use is a 1-2 count in your head. And across the board, that works well for everyone I work with. So I always tell clients when you're training with me, count in your head, don't count out loud. 1-2, 1-2 up, 1-2 down, 1-2 up, 1-2 down, 1-2 in, 1-2 out, 1-2 in, 1-2 out. When you focus on your tempo speed, you're controlling the weight. You also have to remember not just to focus on your tempo speed, but you also want to focus on your breathing. And a 1-2 tempo speed works excellent when it comes to breathing because you can really control your breathing if you're following that 1-2 tempo speed. So if you're going on an exertion, let's say on a seated row, 1-2 in, breathe out, 1-2 out, breathe out. Okay. 1-2 in, breathe out. 1-2 out, breathe in. Sorry, I said that backwards. So always breathe out on exertion. Okay. So like a barbell back squat exertion is going to be the up phase, not the down phase. The down phase is not the hard part. Coming back up is going to be the hard part, right? But on something like, say, a tricep press down, well, the hard phase is going to be the down phase, right? So you're going to breathe out on the down phase. So always breathe out on exertion. And my recommendation is to follow that 1-2 tempo speed. And you can't go wrong because if you are doing a quick 1-2 in your head, you're going to keep that time under tension on the muscles, not the joints. Okay. And the reason I say to everyone, just use the 1-2 tempo speed because it's not complicated. You just have to count 1-2 in your head. That's it. So 1-2, 1-2, that's it. And if you follow that, you should be fine. Okay. It's the people who I see who are just doing ballistic reps that usually end up injuring themselves. Sometimes I see people doing really slow reps. And to me, I know there's a lot of trainers out there that say, yeah, nice and slow. I'm like, I disagree with that because I think if you go too slow, let's say on a barbell bench press, you're going really slow. I honestly think that you're putting a lot of strain on the ligaments and the tendons. So I don't recommend people do that because you risk elongating those ligaments and tendons. So again, the goal is to stimulate, not annihilate the muscles, preserve the joints, ligaments, and tendons. Stick to the 1-2 tempo speed, focus on breathing out on exertion of every exercise you do, and you should remain injury free and you're going to get results. All right. Okay. Nick, are compound lifts better than isolation exercises? So I've had this question a few times, and it's not that one's better than the other, but they both offer different benefits. So compound exercises are what's compared to building a house. Okay, you're going to build a house. So your compound exercises are your steel, your wood, your foundation. You're building the house. Your isolation exercises are the finishing touches, the cosmetics. You're painting your house. You're adding vanities to your house. You're adding furniture to your house. That's the isolation. You need both. You don't want to build a house and have it completely empty, but you also can't paint a house that doesn't exist. Okay, so this is why it's important from the very beginning to do both. But what I recommend people do, especially beginners, is to focus more on the compound movements. So your bench press, your barbell back squats, your deadlifts, your seated rows, your lat pull downs, your shoulder presses, your lateral raises, the more bang for your buck per se. Okay, so these are the exercises that build the muscle. But you don't just want blocky muscle. Now you want a little bit more detail. So you want to throw some isolation work. Now, isolation work could be something like a cable lateral raise where you're doing one side at a time, 15 reps one side, now 15 reps the other side. I recommend people do at least 1 or 2 isolation exercises for every muscle group. Okay. And one of the reasons I like isolation movements as well, it prevents muscular imbalances. There's so many times I'll work with someone and I'll get them under a bar and they're bench pressing and the bench press is looking like this, right? So one side's going down all the other way, but the other side's not going down as far and the bar is slanted, okay? Now that's usually a muscular imbalance, whether it be tightness in the rotator cuff or it's previous injury that's occurring, or the person is just not as strong in one side versus the other. So doing an exercise like a cable crossover or a dumbbell crossover or even dumbbell bench press where you're working each side independently will offer benefits to prevent that muscular imbalance. So in my opinion, it's important to have both. Okay. But for beginners, I strongly advise you to focus more on the compound. And as you become more advanced in your training, start adding more isolation work in. All too often, I see a lot of people who are quite obvious beginners are not as well versed in the gym, focusing too much on isolation work. And, like I'll see women doing those band kickbacks with the cable for their glutes. I'm like, you'd be better off squatting under a bar because you need to build your glutes first. You can't paint something that doesn't exist. Okay. So build your glutes first and then start bringing in more detail. Okay. So do both, but focus first on the one that's going to build the muscle. So focus first on what's going to build your house and then paint your house second. So still do your glute kickbacks on your cable, but do your barbell back squats first. Do your barbell hip thrust first. Okay. Same thing I say to the guys. I'm like, you want to build a lot of times I see a lot of guys that go in the gym and they want to build a bigger chest. So they'll focus on the compound lifts. They'll go do bench press. But very rarely do I ever see them focusing on the flies. I'm like, so you're working pec major, but you're ignoring pec minor. That's not good. Or you'll get a lot of these people who go to the gyms, and guys are guilty of this. They just want to work the show muscles. They just want to work the biceps. They just want to work the chest. They want to work the delts, and they neglect their back. And then you see guys walking around like this because they have a weak back, but they have an overpowering, overmuscular chest deltoid region. So that's not good. So you want to make sure that you're training each muscle group evenly so you prevent muscular imbalances and you create perfect symmetry throughout the physique. Okay. So it's not that one is better than the other. You want to do both, but as you become more advanced in your training, you want to bring in more isolation work, but you never want to take out the compound lifts. 25 years now of training. I still do bench press every week. I still do barbell back squats every week. As most people know, I'm not a huge fan of deadlifts, so I don't do them, but I don't tell people don't do them. If you like doing deadlifts, do them. For me, I've never felt them to offer any benefits, but I still stick to my compound lifts. My seated rows, my lat pull downs, my barbell military presses, those are staples in my routine. And I'm hoping, as long as I stay injury free, that I can continue to do those as I become older because I feel they're necessary. And at the same time, I don't neglect my isolation work because I want to make sure that I don't have any muscular imbalances and I want to make sure that I'm creating perfect symmetry throughout my physique. And I like adding more detail to the muscle. I don't just want to have big blocky muscles. I want to add more detail, more striations, that solid, lean, dense muscle look. That's important to me. So I do a combination of the two. But what I advise for everyone, whether you're beginner or advanced, compound movements at the beginning of your workout, isolation workouts towards the middle or end of your workout. All right. Okay. Um, Next question. Sorry, I lost my spot. Uh, Nick, is high volume training better than high intensity training? I hear you talk about high volume training a lot and wondering if you prefer to train with high volume over high intensity. Yeah, so I like to use both, but at the same time, I'm a firm believer in high volume workouts with moderate intensity. Moderate intensity doesn't mean easy, okay? Moderate intensity means that it should still be a challenge. I had a new client ask me today, online client say, I noticed that you've put my rep range between 12 to 15. Should that be a challenge for me, or should I be able to easily get 12 to 15? I'm like, if I'm asking you for 15 reps, those last two or three reps should be a challenge for you. You should be struggling with that. Okay. You shouldn't just be breezing through it unless it's a warm up set. But if it's a working set, those last three or four repetitions really should be a challenge. Okay. So what I tell people is if you can, use a scale of 1 to 10, one being very easy, 10 being very difficult. Try to keep your intensity level between a 7 or 8. Because if it's at a 10, throughout the whole 45, 60 minutes of your workout, you're going to burn out and you risk injury. If it's a 2, you're not going to get results. Okay. So really only you can tell that because you know how you feel internally. I have a fairly good eye for that, especially with clients who've been working with me for 20 plus years. I know their bodies. I know how they respond to the workouts. I know when to back off. I know when to push them more. But a lot of people, especially people who are not well versed in the gym, they themselves might not know that. And I understand that. And for those people, I do recommend keeping, I don't want to call it a journal, but keeping track of your weights, whether that means on your phone and say, okay, last week I bench pressed 135 and it felt pretty good. Also whenever you're recording your weights, also say how you're feeling. Like that felt pretty easy actually. So maybe this week go for 145. Actually, that felt really hard. My shoulder really hurt and okay, back off. Maybe go down to 120. Okay. So you have to really pay attention to how the exercises are affecting your physique. Okay. And I don't just mean aesthetically, but internally. Okay. So not every exercise is for every person. It's the same thing I say for diet. Not every food is for every person. So if I have someone who every time I give them bench press, they're in severe pain in the rotator cuff, well, I'm not going to give them bench press. I might say, okay, you know what? We're going to do some flat dumbbell bench press for the next few weeks. We might go back to flat barbell bench press, but for now, we're not going to do that because that's affecting other issues in your physique. If you have a shoulder issue now because we're doing flat barbell bench press, You might not be able to do a barbell back squat and balance that bar on your traps because you can't retract your shoulder properly. Okay. So you have to really pay attention to how an exercise is affecting your body. Okay. And say, should I be doing this exercise or should I not be doing this exercise? And you have to also be, and this is where a lot of people struggle, is realistic with yourself and say, hey, I could probably take this up a notch. Because there's a lot of people that, I see on a regular basis who go into the gym. Not only do they do the same routine over and over again, which they shouldn't do, but they do the same weights. I'm like, you've been doing that same weight for like the past year. And if you truly feel that you can't increase the weight on that exercise, maybe it's time to switch up the exercise. Okay, because you've hit a plateau. So if you're struggling and you're always bench pressing 225 and that weight hasn't gone up in 6 months to a year, don't keep doing 225. Move on to another exercise and maybe take that out for the next 6 months and bring it back in. Or pre-exhaust, put that exercise in at the end of your workout. I talked about this when I try to get my bench press up. I put my bench press in at the end of the workout. So I reverse what I just said with I still do my isolation work at the end, but I reverse and I say, oh, you know what, I'm going to do some dumbbell presses and do a pre-exhaust system. Again, this is something that I recommend for people who are more advanced in their training. Don't do this if you're a beginner, but there's all these different ways that you can increase intensity without necessarily increasing the amount of weight you're lifting. Okay. So pre-exhaust techniques work well. Supersets work great. Drop sets are amazing. Giant sets are always great to include. But those are training techniques that I don't recommend people do until they have at least got like at least 6 months to a year under their belt of training. Okay. So if you're a beginner, ignore that. Okay. But try to focus on how you're feeling throughout your sets. And if it's too easy, take the weight up. If it's too hard, you're like, man, you know what? My elbows hurt, my shoulders hurt doing this, take the weight down. Obviously, the more experienced you become and the more you do it, you'll have a better idea of when to back off and when to push more. Okay. Okay. Nick, what's the best way to build a wider back? Pull downs. A lot of people say pull ups, but I watch a lot of people do pull ups. The first one or two look great, and after that, they're swinging around, they look sloppy, they're using everything except their back to get themselves up over that bar. So that's why I recommend pull downs. And when it comes to pull downs, there are so many different types of pull downs that you can do. You can do a standard lat pull down, which is a pronated grip, also known as an overhand grip, that works your outer lats. Then you could do a reverse grip pull down, also known as a supinated grip, which is going to work your lower lats. You could do a closed grip pull down, which is a neutral grip that's going to work your inner lats. And then if you really want, you could throw in what we call an isolateral pull down, which is two separate cables and you're splitting the cables, pulling down, working your exterior lats. So those are four movements right there that I just gave you that have nothing to do with pull-ups. I'm not saying don't do pull-ups, but I'm saying if you truly want to develop a wider back, what worked for me over the years and works for a lot of my clients is focusing more on the pull downs. Again, when I watch people doing pull-ups, the first one, sometimes even 3 reps, they look great, perfect. Then after that, they get sloppy and they're swinging around, they're using their biceps, they're using their rhomboids, their scapula, but they're not actually engaging their lats. Like, well, what's the purpose of that? If your goal is to build a wider back, focus on what works, and then you can actually choose the weight, dictate the speed. Because if you're doing a cable pull down, you say, I'm gonna do 85 pounds. Oh, now I'm getting tired. I feel like I'm using more of my forearms, more of my biceps. Oh, drop that down to 70 pounds. So you can control the weight. You can throw in static contractions, right? So you're coming down, give it a quick 1-2 squeeze, release. So you're really trying to focus on squeezing the lats. So in my experience, what worked for me, especially when I competed, because I always struggled with a wider back, developing that wider back. It was always a critique I got from the judges. Your back needs to be wider. Everything else looks great. Your back needs to be wider. So I focused on a 2-day back program. I talked about that in the past, but incorporating that pull down day. And I would throw in at least 4, sometimes 5 pull downs. Another pull down I forgot about, box grip pull downs. Those are great too. So that's 5 pull down movements right there that you could do. That'd be a whole workout. So I find that works well. So focus on your pull down movements and most importantly, really focus on squeezing those muscles. You have to really have a strong mind to muscle connection when you're training your back. And again, that comes from years of experience because a lot of people, they can't really focus on squeezing their back. They can squeeze their biceps. That's not a problem. They can usually even squeeze their chest. They'll feel their shoulders, especially when they're doing shoulder press, lateral raises, they burn out quickly. The back is a little bit more complex and it requires a little bit more focus. Same thing with the hamstrings. Any muscles that you can't really see, you really have to focus on that mind to muscle connection. And that comes with time and experience. All right. Okay. Few more questions here. Nick, how do you target all 3 heads of the triceps? So I like to focus on primarily cable movements for the triceps. As for building my triceps for bigger arms, I focus more on my presses. So I'll do like I said, incline barbell bench press, flat barbell bench press, barbell military press. But when it comes to building more definition in my triceps on my arm day, I like to focus on a lot of cable work. So I'll do some rope extensions, I'll do some straight narrow bar press downs, I'll do some V bar press downs, I'll do some isolation work as well on each arm with the rope. So I'm working each arm independently. And then I will throw in a free weight exercise like skull crushers. And I find that works really well because you have to remember your triceps have three heads, your biceps have two heads. So, in my opinion, a good tricep workout is going to consist of a minimal or minimum, sorry, I should say, of three tricep exercises. And you can actually activate all three of those heads just by your grips. So a rope extension, for example, you're using a neutral grip, so you're going to work the outer head of the tricep. Narrow bar press down, you're using a pronated grip, so you're going to work the exterior part of the tricep. And then if you want, you can throw in a V-bar press down, which is going to work the internal part of the tricep head. So just by three cable works, right? Skull crushers are great to add in because it is a free weight movement. And actually, I feel that like when I do skull crushers, I actually feel like all three heads get activated. So it's almost like a compound exercise for the triceps. And also, don't forget to neglect your biceps. Most people, they tend to neglect their triceps, especially guys. I see a lot of guys, they train their biceps and they don't really train their triceps. That's a mistake because if you look at your arm, most of the arm is actually like going to be your triceps. Your triceps have three heads. Biceps only have two heads. Biceps have the peak and the length. That's it. So I would focus more on the triceps and the biceps. I usually give my triceps one or two more exercises than my biceps. I find that works really well, and I do that with a lot of my clients as well. So that's what I focus on more is the cable work, but most importantly, focus on your grips because that's going to activate different heads. So as I said, you got a neutral grip, you got a pronated grip. You could even do a supinated grip if you want to as well, just to work maybe the back head of the tricep. So focus more on your grips. That's going to bring in more detail to your triceps. Do not neglect your presses though, because that's going to build more size overall. Because don't forget, when you're doing your barbell bench presses, whether that be incline, flat, 90-degree barbell military press, your triceps are your synergist muscles. Just like any row or pull down you do on back day, your biceps are your synergist muscles. You can't turn them off. They're going to work a little bit. Okay. They're going to assist in the pull, they're going to assist in the push. So you go heavy, it's going to help develop them more, making them a little bit bigger. Do the arm work on a separate day, bring in more detail. All right. Okay. Okay. I think that might be. Oh, no, there is one more question. All right. Uh, Nick, what exercises are best for rear delts? Another good question because rear delts is an exercise that I see so many people neglect on their program, their shoulder day. They'll do the shoulder press, they'll do the lateral raise, but then they forget about their rear delts. You've got three deltoid heads. You got your anterior deltoid, your medial deltoid, and your posterior deltoid. You also have your trapezius and rhomboids. So what I like to focus on with my clients are bent over movements that offer isolation, isolation, I should say isolation movements. Sorry, I misspoke. Isolation movements that require the rhomboids and scapula to turn off and the posterior deltoids to engage more efficiently. Because a lot of times when people do rear delt exercises, they involve a lot of the rhomboids, scapula, and the lats. We don't want to do that. We want to isolate the rear delts. The rear delts are also small, so they're not to be confused with the back. They're separate. What I find works best though, rear delt dumbbell raises and rear delt cable raises. So you're bent over, and ideally you try to get your body parallel to the floor. And what I usually do with my clients is I'll actually set up a very low incline bench and I'll ask them to put their forehead on that bench while they're bent over. This ensures that their body stays in alignment because if you're bent over, once fatigue starts to set in, you slowly start to rise. You don't mean to, but your body just does it naturally. So if you have your head on the bench, you're not going to do that because you're like, no, I can't take my head off the bench. So your body stays parallel to the floor if you're using a low incline. Okay. It's harder. But the great thing with rear delts, you don't have to lift super heavy to develop them. Keep your elbows slightly bent, reverse fly. This is like a reverse fly. So I always tell clients who train chest with me, all you're doing now, so a fly is like this for your chest, you're just reversing that for your back. Okay. Always keep your elbows slightly bent. So for my shoulder days, I always do the bent over rear delt dumbbell flies, which again, I do on the bench. I put my forehead on the bench so my body stays parallel to the floor. Honestly, I don't go heavier than 25-pound dumbbells ever. And I felt that that really works for my rear delts over the years because I was able to develop them because I can squeeze them properly and not use my lats. And then I'll also do an isolation movement with a cable and do one side at a time, bent over parallel. So I find those work really well. If you're at a commercial grade gym, you could probably do a reverse pec deck. Those work as well. You could do some compound crossover movements as well on the cables. But I always like to do at least one freeway movement and at least one cable movement when it comes to my shoulders. I find that works exceptionally well. And again, you have to be very careful when it comes to the shoulders because the shoulders are a small muscle group. They're not big, but they're a very complex muscle group because you've got a lot going on there with your anterior deltoid, medial deltoid, posterior deltoid, all within a 4 inch radius. Okay, so that's why you hear a lot of people who tear, they might have a muscle tear in the rotator cuff, right? They might dislocate their shoulder. But I see a lot of shoulder injuries, and it's because people don't train properly, or they use that ballistic training, or they don't practice proper symmetry. So you want to work your anterior deltoid, you want to work your medial deltoid, you want to work your posterior deltoid, and don't forget about your traps and rhomboids as well. Maybe throw in some upright rows. You could throw in some shrugs. I'm not a big fan of shrugs personally. I find that they put a lot of pressure on the neck erectors and you kind of get a wider neck. So I don't like doing shrugs, but I find upright rows work really well when you're trying to develop the traps. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going out on Monday, August the 18th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.